Innovation is in our veins. Soon the whole world will know our names. Sharing our knowledge and freedom reign. We here for the people, you know it's our way. Setting foundations is part of the dream. It doesn't matter if you're new to the game. Listen up now, cause we all gon' say, elevate, 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 higher, elevate, 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 higher. We gon' rise up, we all gon' shine. Work through adversity, stay on the grind. Elevate, elevate, this is our time. Elevate, elevate.
Welcome to the Elevate Podcast, everyone. It's so great to have you all on one more time. It's your boy Josh
and Reg,
and we're grateful to be back on with you yet again. We didn't have to switch the camera there. We are super excited. Earlier this week, you would have seen, wow, you only had about a 45-minute episode on the show. What was going on? Well, it's because we had a second episode dropping today here on Thursday. We have MLA Elizabeth Smith-McCrossin, representing Cumberland North here in Nova Scotia, on with us. Works as an independent. You had some history with our show. You came on about 3 years ago when the show had all of 25 viewers, and you gave us the time of day, especially at a time that was very, it was hot. It was very loud. People really frustrated over COVID, really frustrated with the restrictions and the laws that were put in place. Highways may have been shut down. You may have shouldered the blame unfairly on some of those. It was not a good time. You can go back to the episode. You really want to rehash all that because we won't do it right now, which led to an election. Unfortunately, you know, at the time you were part of the PC party. Because of all the craziness in the media and the circus that it was, they said, well, you know, I think it's best we part ways. So you ended up becoming an independent candidate, and then won in convincing fashion because, well, people are just like, wow, it's so nice to have someone in power who actually represents what we believe. And that is, I think, really shows in, I think you won like 53% of the vote in that election, something like that.
Something like that,
yeah. We won't, get into it. It was 53%. And really smoked it. And then since then, a lot of crazy things have been happening. Obviously, we have issues with housing and healthcare, and people getting more almost frustrated as they see what's going on the federal level in the country. And then also they unfairly at times kind of cast that onto the provincial representatives at times. Mm-hmm. So I'd be kind of curious to hear what's going on, what's happening, but super happy to have you, Elizabeth.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you.
No problem. So the question that I'm going to continue on here with is, what are some big things that you're seeing from your constituents? Like, what are some like the big items that people are coming to you with and you're looking to find solutions for in your riding?
Hands down, healthcare continues to be the number one issue. So each and every day, last night, 11 o'clock at night, I got a message from someone whose partner is diagnosed with breast cancer. So it's an ongoing challenge, trying to get people the healthcare that they need and that they deserve. And I would say 80% of the work that I do is around getting people access to healthcare. Affordability issues, I'm seeing people, especially people that have retired, that are accustomed to having enough money to put food on the table, that are coming into my office very, very distressed, having to go to the food bank maybe for the first time in their lives. Wow. It's very humbling. It's very challenging for a lot of people right now with affordability. Housing, access to housing. We have people that just simply have no place to lay their head at night, no safe place. That's a challenge. And crime has really increased since the pandemic. It's a real issue. It's not always directly related, but also an issue is the increased use of illicit drugs and addiction rates. And our government has not been able to pivot and move to provide the services right now that are needed in our community to support those that are struggling with addictions. And that has become a very big issue.
Yeah, for sure. I grew up in a small town on the Bay of Fundy, and from where I lived, that was kind of the big thing, was that whenever we saw spikes in the economy where things started to go really badly, we saw crime go up, we saw the use of drugs go up, we saw, different things that are maybe not directly related, but definitely correlated, happen. So I find that very, very true to kind of the experience of my lived experience being, like I said, a local boy in small town Maritimes. But I just wonder, when you talk about some of these reforms and some of the things that you push forward to kind of address these, how do you actually come up with this? Is this something that you do in consultation with your constituents? Is this something that you research? How are you kind of drafting these pieces of legislation that you're putting forward?
Great question. Every piece of legislation that I bring forward comes from the people that I represent. I'll give you an example. One thing that we got changed was for nurses. So LPNs in this province, unless they went to Nova Scotia Community College right here in the province, were not eligible for the additional 2 years to become a registered nurse. We got that changed. It took time, but that started by LPNs coming to me saying, Elizabeth, this is not fair. A lot of people in Cumberland County, because of our proximity to New Brunswick, do their training in Moncton. So we have a lot of LPNs and RNs that go to school in Moncton. They live and work in Cumberland County, and they're often penalized because of that. And this education issue was one of them. Now, we did get that changed. We are still working on another issue for nurses. They don't qualify for the loan forgiveness program.
Right.
Even if they live and work in Cumberland County, Nova Scotia, if they did their education next door, they don't qualify. So that needs to change. So, but every issue that comes forward with our bills comes from either constituents and or stakeholders. I'll give you an example. Dr. Hugh McGuire, he leads the Northern Zone for psychiatry. And a couple of years ago, we were working on trying to make improvements for mental health care and addictions in our region. And he told me, he said, Elizabeth, one of the big problems legislatively is Cumberland Regional is not included in the Involuntary Psychiatric Treatment Act. It's not listed as one of the hospitals that psychiatrists can go to do assessments. So that's why, parents, family members would come to me saying, my loved one maybe has schizophrenia or some sort of an acute psychotic episode. They're taken to the emergency department at Cumberland, and they're always taken to Truro. Well, that's why. So Dr. McGuire said, get that changed, and then we can work on improving things locally. We got that changed. So I put that forward as a bill, and then that got changed about a year ago. And since then, just in December, we got 2 new psychiatrists. They're now on call, and they will go to our hospital and see patients at our hospital so that our people that are suffering from mental illness don't always have to travel outside of our area. So those are just a couple of examples.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it just kind of makes me think too around the idea, because that's a huge thing to get changed.
It is huge.
And then kind of the power of an independent being able to change something like that. That's something that I think is really kind of interesting. And I wonder, can you kind of speak to a little bit about, your choice to continue to run as an independent and what kind of led you to doing that? Because I know that you're very passionate about healthcare, you're very passionate about your community. And I'm just wondering, when you think about some of this stuff, and I know that you just alluded to and spoke to one of the things that you were able to change, what does that change process look like? So kind of, again, first, just giving your experience as an independent, and then 2, how does that look like? And then also maybe a little bit of how does that look like compared to somebody who's running it as a member of a party?
Great question. I'll give you a real life example that happened with emergency departments in our area. So next door in Colchester North is a PCMLA, so in government. And then to the other side in Cumberland South is not only a PCMLA, but a cabinet minister, okay? Both of those areas, including a hospital in my area, were all designated by Nova Scotia Health to lose their emergency departments, 24/7 emergency departments. It was Tatamagouche, Pugwash, and Parsborough. And when I found out, I knew that was absolutely going to be a downgrade for our community. They would lose access to triage and to emergency care. So I let the community know. They spoke out. They were not happy because some of the marketing from the government was that it was a positive thing. It wasn't a positive thing. Urgent care centers are only open about 8 hours a day, Monday to Friday. They have booked appointments similar to a doctor's office. Once those appointments are filled, people are turned away. An emergency department, you may have to wait, but you're never turned away. You're triaged, and the sickest are seen first. So long story short, the emerge department in Tatamagouche and Parsborough were both downgraded to an urgent care center, only open Monday to Friday. Pugwash emergency is still open 24/7 and triaged, and that is only because they have an independent MLA that can speak up and cannot be silenced, versus a government MLA can be told if they disagree, even though it's what's best for their people, they are told to be silent and go with the flow, or there will be consequences or punishment. That's unfortunately the culture of politics right now. Very much centralized decision making and not allowing MLAs to truly be the voice of the people that they represent. And that's why people get frustrated with politics.
Absolutely. And I'm then curious is, and you don't have to answer this, but your first term, you're a PC candidate. Did you ever experience that yourself? And then the party wanted to bring things forward and then being told, that's not along party lines.
So I experienced it the entire time that I was with the party, including, so when I first started, I was placed as the health critic because I'm a registered nurse. And the very first interview I did was regarding a very tragic situation where a person waited too long for a diagnostic test. And the loved one spoke out about it after the person's demise. And the reporter asked me, well, what would you have done differently? And my answer was, we have a centralized healthcare system that works together. People should be able to find out if there is a diagnostic imaging appointment. Maybe it's 2 hours away, but if it's 2 weeks quicker, they should be given access to those appointments. And because of our system, we should always know that there's a 2-week wait in Amherst, but a 8-week wait in Halifax. Give patients the options to travel, knowing that their diagnosis and treatment could go faster. And I was hauled into the office and told, you are not allowed to give solutions and ideas. You are only allowed to criticize the government.
No way.
Yes.
I mean, it makes sense. I get it. That was, I guess, in your title, but that's crazy.
I was flabbergasted. I was like, that is not why I put my name on the ballot.
Right.
I put my name on the ballot to create positive change. And the only way to do that is by putting ideas out there and talking about the issues. So yes, that happened again and again and again. And to your answer to your question earlier, that is one of the reasons why I am running again as an independent, because I believe that I can truly represent the people, and that's democracy. And I can be more effective as an independent. My level of frustration and level of conflict in a day-to-day in my week is much less as an independent as well. And I put that out as an advertisement for anybody considering running in politics. They should consider that running as an independent is a very good option. And I'm not against political parties. I think that they can be effective with the right leadership. You need to have the right leadership that actually empowers each and every MLA to be the voice of the people.
Absolutely. And that's the one thing I do know about you over the years is you are someone who isn't afraid to rock the boat. You're not afraid to, say hard things. So I'll ask this question just as a joke as we move into our further line of questioning is how many times were you hauled in the principal's office? I'm curious. How many times?
Well, too many to count.
Really? It was that many? Like during it would have been 4 years that you would have been at the PCs?
Yeah, I was elected in 2017,
right.
May 31st, 2017, and removed June 23rd, I believe.
Right.
Yeah. And 2021, is that right? Yes, 2021. So, yeah, too many to count. And I've actually written resignation letters on 4 different occasions.
Wow.
Because of the level of frustration that I was being asked to be silent. There was, during the pandemic, we met virtually, the legislature. And in the closing remarks, I believe it was the spring session, I had a whole speech ready, as every other MLA did, for closing remarks. And I got a phone call from one of my colleagues saying, Elizabeth, we do not want you to speak.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
I said, excuse me? Yes, we are asking you not to speak. We do not want you to give remarks. And I complied. There's many times that I did out of respect, because when you're on a team, it's give and take. And, there's times where you need to be humble and you need to, but sometimes it was wrong what they asked, because they were silencing me, just like they silence others in being the voice of their people. But that's just one example. Unfortunately, it happened a lot. It's very controlled
Right.
culture, very controlled. messaging.
Yeah, exactly. Messaging right on top of it. I can only, and this is the crazy part. It's like, it's one thing to kind of hear at a provincial level. I can only imagine what it's like at the federal. Even seeing what all the chaos that's going on up there, I can only imagine what those conversations are like behind the scenes. But this is really important for people to hear what things are even like at the provincial level, like how controlled it is, what you're allowed to talk about, what you're not allowed to talk about. The one story I like telling on this podcast is one of your first times in legislature when you first got in. And you were asking the Liberal member a very specific question. It was around healthcare. I don't remember the specific question, but they weren't answering your question. And you would rephrase it and give it to them again. And the person wouldn't answer it, dance around it. And it got to the point where it's like 3 or 4 times, you're just like, I don't think the member opposite is hearing me right now. And then everyone started laughing. There's like, yeah, because that's the game, And that was the one thing that was just like, as someone who's you were a political outsider coming in, or like, wait, you're not going to answer my questions? That's crazy to me.
It is crazy.
And it should be. And like that, but that's just, it's interesting how that's the culture of politics. And how have you been able to kind of fight against that as an independent sense? And as you said, as we kind of talked about earlier, again, like what are some specific instances of you working directly with these parties to be able to get some of these bills passed? Because it's not without influence that you're able to make it happen.
Yeah. So I've already shared a few examples where we were able to find some success. And I'll give you an example where we're still working hard and pushing, and that's around the misuse of NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. And the NDP party had tabled a bill, Claudia Gender had tabled a bill a couple of years ago, and it mirrored legislation that's currently already passed in Prince Edward Island. And unfortunately, the government are not passing that bill or not putting their own bill forward, despite the fact that several members of their party, before they were elected, said that they would pass this legislation. And as an independent, I was able to speak with the leader of the Liberal Party and my colleagues there, and I have to say, they've just been incredible to me when they didn't have to be. There's been, unfortunately, a real pattern of intimidation and bullying against me in the legislature. Every session it happens. And a lot of times when you are in that position, you don't want to say anything. And in several situations, other MLAs stood up and made a point of order, a point of privilege, and said, this is wrong, how this MLA is being treated and discriminated against. So I'm so proud of my colleagues in opposition, both NDP and Liberals. And there's several situations where we work together very collaboratively and strong, and around this NDA issue is one of those examples where we're able to meet, come together, and be unified. And those in government know that what they're doing is wrong, and we will keep pushing. There's some reason, right? And you think about what I've already described, the culture of politics and the silencing of elected politicians. That's exactly what the NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, do to victims of sexual assault, right? Their perpetrators hand over cash, can be $10,000, it can be $100,000 to silence their victims. And then they often, in many cases, go on to continue to harm other victims. We know NDAs were first brought into play legally to be used for things like patent law, not to silence victims of sexual assault. So we're going to continue to push for changes in the laws around the use of NDAs. So that's an example where we're working together in opposition. There's stakeholders that have reached out to government MLAs, including the woman who is the Minister of Status of Women, and is refusing to even respond to people requesting meetings about this issue. So for some reason, they want to avoid this topic, but we're going to keep pushing.
Right. And I guess that kind of like, I love how you started out this whole conversation saying, I had solutions and this is something they didn't like. So I wonder, maybe you could brainstorm with us. What are solutions that could be put into place to stop this kind of silencing of members? Is it a new legislative tool put in place where, members are allowed to vote freely based on their own beliefs, and that has to be constitutionally put into our provincial documents, or are there other things that you can think of? Like I won't put too many ideas out there. I'll let you kind of speak as the expert onto that.
Well, sometimes you can put laws into place, and a former independent MLA, one of my former colleagues who is a female, who was also removed from the PC party by Tim Houston. Alana Pond, she was the MLA for Richmond, a very intelligent, incredible woman. She did, when she was an independent, she did put forth a bill that removed the whip. Okay, so the role of the whip is to whip people into shape and make sure they vote the right way. She had put forth a bill to make those changes. Personally, I think a bill wouldn't hurt, but sometimes common sense is all we need. We don't need bills and laws for everything. And really all it would take is a bit of courage on behalf of the people that are elected. So if you are running for office and you knock on someone's door and say, vote for me, I will be your voice. And then you are blessed enough to be elected and be that voice. Then when you go to the legislature, whether it's, doesn't matter, whatever province it is, have the courage or the balls, sorry, that's not too rude to say.
Let's go.
Nope.
To actually be their voice.
Yeah.
Don't allow yourself to be silenced. So the reality is the power lies within each and every MLA that's sitting in the legislature. You don't have to be silenced. You can say, no, I'm actually going to do what's right here. And if there's consequences, I'll take it. I'll take the heat. But it comes down to knowing, who do you actually work for when you're elected?
Right.
Do you work for the people that elected you, or do you work for the leader of the party? And guess what? Leaders come and go.
Yeah.
Leaders come and go. Your people that you represent will always be there. And it's important for people to remember, in my opinion, that's who you work for. You work for the people.
Right. I do like the idea of removing the whip, though. I think that's great, because it was something that I considered myself to be well-versed in politics. But then when I was watching something on CPAC, and they actually brought up the name, and then they said party whip. And I was like, I thought this was just like a metaphor. I thought this was actually I thought party whip was something that we all just call that person, because it's just custom and convention. But no, it's an actual role.
And they get paid money.
Yeah.
They get a stipend to be the party whip. Alex Marlin, have you met Alex? He's a political science professor at Acadia University, and he's written a book, and it's actually entitled Whipped. If you get a chance,
I gotta
take a read. Mm-hmm. I started reading, and it's like, oh, this is my life. I don't need to, it's too much. But it's very, very well done.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I love what you said, too, about the courage. Do you think it's the fact that people are so terrified that if they lose that party support, because obviously they don't vote with the party, the whip comes and says, well, you didn't vote with us, so you can't be one of us. And then they show you the door. Do you think it's that fear that now I have to run as an independent, and how am I going to do that? Do you think that's what it is?
I think as humans, we all naturally want to belong. We want to be part of a team. And the way I look at it in my mind is my team is Cumberland North. And I do have an advisory team there. We meet regularly. And I always ask them to give me feedback. Like, it's important to have people that will be honest with you, like, you're on track, you're not on track. So I do have a strong advisory team. But I think there is, in general, people want to be conform and be part of a team and not cause too much trouble. But again, who do you work for?
Yeah.
Who do you work for? And that's often what is forgotten. And, my message to any elected official, no matter what party you belong to, is always have the courage to remember who you work for and who are your bosses. And I remember the very first, when I was first elected in 2017, our mandate letters that were given to each and every one of us, at the end of it said, your number one goal, and as I'm reading it, I'm like anticipating that it's going to say is to work for the people. No, it said your number one goal is to get reelected.
Wow.
I know. I was so disappointed. I was so disappointed in the leadership at that time, because in my opinion, if you do your job, you will get reelected. You don't need to worry about that, because the people will know if you work for them or not. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, yes.
Yeah. I mean, hate to say it, but I will bring it back up because I think it was such a special time in our history as Nova Scotians, if I'm being honest. You know, how we came through the pandemic and all the things that happened and what led to you leaving the PC party was just, we go back to the conversation of why people don't speak up. It's because they see what they did to her. And they're like, I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah.
You were disparaged in the media unfairly. There was media coverage that refused to be released because it just painted you in a positive light. Right. You had the leader of the Liberal Party who's disparaging in the media. And then you had the leader of the Conservative Party or the PC Party disparaging in the media. And then they said, you can leave now. Yeah. And then that hard, long walk up as an independent now, you're back to where, you know, we're coming up eventually at the end of an election cycle here, and that time will come for you to, you know, have to go back to another election. But I just remember how your constituents reacted to that situation. Mm-hmm. I can only imagine how hard it was on you, how hard it was on your family, how hard it was on you to go through all that. But then to see the people show up and be like, no, you spoke up for us when no one else would. That is what it's all about. And I think that's something MLAs need to like really see. And anyone, whether it be at the federal level as an MP, provincial level as an MLA, or you're a council member, if you're doing it for the people, you will be rewarded. And I think your journey is very, signifies that. And I think you just got to have a bit of a thick skin though. And you did that. You pulled that off.
It is inspiring. It is honestly inspiring because like Josh said, like not a lot of people can take all that and then still get right back on the horse again, get back in the arena. And I think that was kind of where I had the most respect for you when I was watching, because the whole province was watching and we were hearing quite a different story from what we were hearing from people on the ground. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about Maritimes from Nova Scotia is that people talk. We're a little bit smarter than people give us credit for. And so even though the media was coming out and kind of, you know, saying horrific things, you know, that just weren't true, the people on the ground knew what was up. And we see that in your reelection, and we see that. But I can only imagine like that toll that it took on you though in that period of time. And I don't know if you want to relive that at all, but I'm just thinking about for the folks who may be questioning their party status, whether they're a Liberal candidate, they're a PC candidate, they're an NDP, or even folks who are considering entering the political sphere at all on the provincial level and are considering whether or not they should join a party, whether or not they should go independent. What would be your wisdom to either folks looking to join or folks who are currently embroiled in this and are thinking about going it out on their own?
Well, you know, bringing all that up, it is emotional. It was an emotional time. But I will say emphatically what the people went through in our area was much worse than anything I experienced for 17 months.
Yeah.
And I'm actually working on a book. I don't know if it'll ever be published, but I've got story after story after story of some of the hardships that people went through living in our border community for those 17 months. And, you know, just an example, a year after I was at a music festival and a woman come up to me and this still happens on a regular basis. People just say, you know, I know you don't know who I am, but I just want to say thank you for fighting for us and thank you for everything that you did. And you probably don't know this, but I actually went to work every day in the trunk of my husband's car because I worked, she worked as a caregiver on the other side of the provincial border, and they wouldn't approve her to cross to go to work. But her husband's work, he was approved. So they went together every day, but she went in the trunk. Like, think about that. You know, I had a mother whose daughter died of cancer, and she wasn't allowed to go to her own daughter's funeral 40 minutes away. And there was no COVID at the time. Like, there was 0 COVID cases in all of Cumberland County. Yet these rules were, like, I just share those 2 stories as 2 of hundreds of stories of the ways people's lives were impacted in our area. And yes, it was hard. It was devastating when I got the call from Tim Houston that day. But I knew it was going to happen because the night before, the day before, when everyone was at the border blocked, and I was here in Halifax trying to get a meeting with the Premier to say, help us. we had a caucus meeting, a conference call, and I was asked to make it clear that I didn't support the blockade at the border. I was asked to make it clear that I was not an anti-vaxxer, that I supported vaccinations. I was asked to do these things, and I said, absolutely, I will do that. And then as soon as the meeting was over, I went to the caucus office to do this and was given a document to sign that said I was responsible for the border blockade and taking full legal responsibility. And I said, no, I refused to sign that. And I said, that is not what I agreed to. That is not what I agreed to. And the whole evening and most of the night, I was in conversations with the president of the party and others trying to find a way through this where where I could do what my colleagues asked me to do, which was to say I didn't support the blockade of the Nova Scotia-New Brunswick border. Why would I support that blockade? I fought for 17 months to have the borders open, right? And yes, the day before, I joined people in a protest at Exit 7, 43 kilometers from the border. I was never at the border. And the media all knew that. They were in both locations, both days, but they never reported the second day, right? They only showed pictures the first day. So anyways, when I was asked to sign this document, that was not the truth. And when I refused, I knew that the consequence was probably going to be that I was removed. And that is the next day I got a call. And I was devastated. They were my teammates, despite the conflict, despite everything we had been through for the last 4 years. I did consider them my team. And, when you go through a lot together, you do form strong bonds and strong relationships. And the reality is none of them stood up to the premier, right, to say, no, this is wrong. Yeah. So it was a difficult time, but hands down, what I went through was nothing compared to what the people that I represented went through for 17 months.
Wow. Yeah. And I take a bit of a lighthearted approach
yes.
here, but in that same vein, though, for sure, is, a couple months ago, we see the carbon tax protest kick up. And stuff starts happening at the border. Were you kind of in your office like, oh no, here we go again? Was that happening at all in your mind? Or you're just like, no, this will actually be okay?
I haven't gone out and spoken to them. Mm-hmm. I fully support our Canadian Charter that people have a right to public protest. That's fine. I've gotten a lot of complaints because some of the, no one likes to see our Canadian flag upside down. Mm-hmm. It's real disrespect. And we just had celebration of D-Day here last week, June the 6th, where we thank all the men and women that sacrificed their lives for the liberty and freedom in this country. And I have had some veterans very upset about the sort of abuse that they would see of our Canadian flag. And then there's also been some other flags flown that are disrespectful to leadership. And I think it's important that we can debate issues. I think we have to be careful when it gets too personal. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we're all human beings, whether you agree or don't agree with the policies of the current prime minister. I think it's important that we always try to still show respect, even when we disagree, even if we disagree strongly and vehemently. Yeah. So, it's a touchy issue.
For sure. Yeah. I imagine so.
I was just thinking, I was having this conversation, I think it was last weekend, actually, with some friends where we were all like, we all don't like our current prime minister, but nobody's going to be out there with an F Trudeau flag. That's not how we operate. But yeah, so I totally understand that, especially because, having family that served and myself being in the military for 3 years, and knowing those folks and a lot of really good friends and close friends who are current active military members. An upside down Canada flag is a slap in the face to them. So I definitely hear that and understand that. I wonder what with these individuals that are there, what duty is it on you as the elected official to try and bridge gaps? I know because you're an MLA, you're not an MP, so there's not really a lot for that federal level stuff that you can do. But do you actually communicate with the MP for that region and try and kind of broach either a conversation or deals or whatever have you, like some kind of communication that happens there?
So our MP and I talk on a regular basis, and recently I went to Ottawa and had some meetings with he and other colleagues. So Dr. Stephen Ellis is our Member of Parliament for Cumberland-Colchester, and he's also the Health Shadow Minister. So we have a lot in common. He's a retired family physician and retired military as well. He served 20 years, I believe. So we speak regularly. With regards to the Nova Scotia border, it is provincial land. So any concerns there, like I do direct them to the Premier as well as Minister Alan McMaster, if anyone's listening wants to know, because we are heading into tourism season. We're getting a lot of concerns there. So Minister Alan McMaster is the Finance Minister, but he's also the Minister for Communities, Cultures, Tourism and Heritage, and the Visitor Information Centre is on that provincial land. So I do direct people in that direction because they are the only ones that have the power to make any changes as far as removing people from provincial land. With regards to the carbon tax, I don't think you're going to see the protests against carbon tax stop until there's a change in government and the carbon tax is actually removed, where the reality is that people are really struggling. Too many people are struggling, and you're going to see continued protests, I believe, and you may even see an escalation in the protests against carbon tax. We have seen a really large increase in the fuel prices, and the reality is here in Nova Scotia, the current premier has been quite vocal against the carbon tax, yet he and his government are actually benefiting from the carbon tax because they're charging HST tax on fuel. And I have a bill before on the order paper saying that should be removed. You should not be able to charge tax on tax. So the price of fuel, of course, is the commodity price, which we're not in control of. It's a global price. But then here in Nova Scotia, you have the provincial motor fuel tax, 15.5 cents, federal excise tax, 10 cents per litre, and then the carbon tax, and then 15% tax on top of all of those things.
That's great.
Yeah.
And that's, I think it's wrong. Tax on tax, in my opinion, should not be legal.
Amen. And I mean, that was one of the things, like, I actually did a breakdown showing the HST being one of the biggest benefiters of the carbon tax.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's why I was saying, like, people aren't really pushing to have the carbon tax, like, fully removed because they're loving the income generation from it.
Thank you. You're absolutely right. Fred Tilley is an MLA from Cape Breton region, and he's a chartered accountant by profession. And Fred's really good with numbers. And Keith Irving, actually, also from King South, he's very good with numbers. And they've both shared in the legislature how many millions of dollars the provincial government have benefited from the carbon tax.
Yeah.
Because of the HST portion on it.
But it's not just that. It's like the other crises that we're seeing too, like housing, like the amount of houses that have gone up in value. Like, what has that done? I watched my house. I bought a house last May. And so this past May is our first year in that house.
Congratulations.
And thank you so much. And we have a 1.5-year-old, so we we needed the space, and she loves being outside. But one of the things that we noticed though was that our provincial property valuation and the taxes that we then pay on top of that was insane. It jumped up like something stupid like 75%. It just was insane. And so I can totally see where a provincial government going, well, this is really hard on people. But, the property tax that we're collecting off it, because there's the municipal and the provincial portion, it's huge. As these houses just keep going up in value because of scarcity, and people keep bidding them up and up. Our property tax was originally on a house that was worth $330,000. It's now worth $600,000 apparently in the past 2 years. So you're doubling the amount of tax you can collect off that. So I definitely see where, we feel as citizens that our government is complicit in creating some of the ails of society.
Right.
And so I wonder then, sitting as an independent, how do you bring these kind of things to light when you say, like, I believe that tax on tax is wrong, and everybody's going, amen. We all agree. Yeah. What do you do with that then?
So I brought that's a bill before the legislature, and my colleagues, I try to get them to support it as well. And at the end of the day, you have to be vocal on things, and that's what creates the change. So another component of the bill is that, you're paying that big property tax bill. You're also paying income tax on that money.
Yeah.
That's wrong, in my opinion. So many of the states in the U.S., your property taxes that you pay is a deduction on your income tax, so that you're not paying income tax on top of money you've already paid out in property taxes. I also have a bill in the order paper around restricting the amount that your property taxes can increase each year. Yeah. So there is a capped assessment for people that qualify, but in your case, when you're a new home builder, the cap is removed, and you right. So my bill says that can only go up based on CPI. So if inflation's 2.5%, that's the most it can go up. So it helps to keep some restriction and some control. And you're absolutely right. I mean, you look at the surpluses that our provincial government have benefited from in the last 2 years, like over $1 billion.
Yeah.
And then the spending that's been happening. No transparency, right? No legislative oversight on this spending either, which is a whole other issue. The Auditor General has spoken out against that.
Yeah.
But we do need changes around property taxes here in this province. I completely agree. And what happens when people complain is they'll call the province, and the province will say, "Oh, it's a municipal issue because your property tax bill comes from," because they set the property tax rate. That is true. But the province has the board, the Property Valuation Services Corp, and that's a provincial body, right? The deputy minister's the chair, and the board members are people from around the municipalities. But the province is the one that legislates that. The province does have control. So anyone listening, if your provincial MLA tells you, "Oh no, it's a municipal issue, we can't do anything about it," it's completely wrong. And I had a situation in our area where there was a building that had gone through a fire, and a new owner bought it and started doing work, and whoever was doing the assessing decided they were going to double the property value of this building.
After fire.
After a fire. And the new owner said, "Well, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to be able to afford," because it was going to become a restaurant. "There's no way I can bring in enough money for the operational costs of this building." And you're not going to believe what the assessor said to the owner. He said, "Oh, well, as soon as you finish the renovation, I'm actually going to double it again."
Oh my God.
Yes. So this property went from about 250 assessed value pre-fire to then during renovation 500, and the property owner was told, "Oh, we're going to increase it to $1 million as soon as you're doing." So the owner, guess what they decided to do? I'm just going to bulldoze the building down.
Oh, yeah.
Because there is no way that I can operate any business out of this building and turn a profit. Right. And the fact is, profit is not a bad thing. Businesses have to turn a profit in order to hire employees and to grow and be part of a strong economy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So anyways, I got involved, got a hold of the minister in the department, and I said, "You cannot grow a strong economy and have economic development when you're causing this kind of hardship and harm to a business owner." And it got reassessed and it got changed. And guess what? The new restaurant is opening tomorrow.
Oh, incredible.
For anyone listening, it's called What's for Supper. And it's on Route 6, right across from the Pugwash Fire Hall.
That's awesome. And I also think it's just funny too, because when we think about all these governments who are so concerned about the environment and the carbon emissions, think about the fact that if you bulldoze that building that has embedded carbon, you're like, what are you doing?
What are we doing?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I know we're going over time here, but we're so grateful that you came on. So grateful for all your answers and your vulnerability with our listeners. It really does mean a lot. And I'm sure our listeners are going to get a lot out of this. And I'm sure they're going to be even encouraged to hear what they've heard today. But what we do for all of our guests, you got a minute. Is there anything else you want to say to the people, to that camera right there?
Well, I guess, what can I say? Thank you to both of you. Continue doing what you're doing, because it gives people like myself a place to share our story and what's important. But I think it's important to stay true to your values. I really believe strongly in truth and justice. And when you ask, how do I stay strong through it all? When you know what you're doing is right, and when you know what you're standing for is truth and doing what is right, that's where you get your strength from, right? It's a foundation no one can rock. You can kick people out of parties, you can fire people, but that foundation of truth never changes. So stay firm and be courageous. And one of my strong words that I often share with people is be fearless.
Love to see it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. It really means the world. And we're grateful for all of you for joining us. So whatever it is you're doing, whether you be going on a walk,
That is so
Being fearless.
or just enjoying your great Thursday evening, whatever it is you're doing, wherever you are, we love you. We're out. Peace.